Hey
Hey,
guys,
everybody.
Hello.
welcome back.
Thank
We're
you.
here. Look who joined us today.
I know I can
First
make
guest
it.
to weigh in.
I'm pretty much 100% sure I'm not going to be able to make it next week. And I know last week I mentioned I wasn't sure about this week, but
Well, we're
yeah,
happy that you're here. So
it worked out. We've got my sisters here from California, and then my brother and sister-in-law from Idaho aren't getting here for a few more hours. So
okay.
I have time.
And we have somebody at the door. Ding dong. It's
Charlie.
Hey, Charlie.
Yay.
Hey Charlie, thanks for joining us.
Awesome.
Oh,
So,
you're muted.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a regular thing. We like this.
Yeah.
We're always wanting to add to our book club. The only reason why it's only the three of us is because that's just who shows up every week. So
yeah, I mean, Charlie, if you plan on continuing with us, we should add you to our group chat.
yeah, we have a little group chat and we can add you to that. And then, you're not obligated. I mean, if you
I
want to
don't know. I don't know. Well, let's finish out this book and see how we go from there.
But if this is working for you, then we'll just keep posting the link in the stream, and and none of us are committed.
Yeah.
To the next book. We're just, we just do what we want. But I do have kind of a neat story, because my daughter's wedding is now in 5 days. It's this coming Friday, so we have got starting yesterday was when we started having family coming into town, starting with my sister. Now, hey, I had mentioned that my sister knew that I was losing weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know to what extent she'd been watching my channel, but she knew I had a channel. But it sounds like she wasn't watching it, a lot of it. And so she I don't think she'd seen me from here down. Since I was like this, big. And so we picked her up at the airport yesterday. And when she saw me, she cried.
Oh.
Yeah, she got really emotional.
So sweet.
Yeah.
Wow.
And because she had
worried about you.
She had told me she thought she was going to lose me. And now she feels that I'm going to live. And she got really emotional, and it was really touching for me. I got all teary-eyed too, because I honestly did not realize it was going to have that sort of impact on her. And then
what a gift. What a gift.
And so later today, when my brother and sister-in-law arrive, it's going to be probably kind of emotional for them too, because they are the ones who have no clue that I've been doing this. And the last time they saw me was before I started losing any weight. My health was horrible, and I was in bad shape. So it's going to be interesting. I'm going to try to time it so we can film as they come into my house and see the reaction. And I, of course, have to ask for their permission to actually put it on my channel. I don't know how they feel about it, but we're at least going to record it and be ready just in case they say okay.
That's going to be really cool.
Yeah. But if not, I'll just share how it went.
Yeah.
So.
All right, guys, what do y'all think about this week? We did one chapter 8.
I'm kind of glad we only did one chapter.
Yeah.
Me too. This stuff is, oh my gosh, like she did her research. You can tell she's a journalist.
Very much so.
Really, oh man, it's a lot.
Yeah,
it is a lot. It is a very complex book, and I know we talked a little bit before we came on live about that. And like we were talking about how Dr. Berry, his books, and some of the others, like even Dr. Fung, his stuff got complicated, but there was still, I don't know, kind of a sense of humor that was kind of thrown in or something. This book is it's almost like a case for going to court. Like you've got your documents in order. You've got your statements. You've got your statistics. You've got your facts all laid out. So there is
just the facts, ma'am. That's what it is.
Just the facts.
She's a real journalist.
Well,
a real one.
I think it's different because with Dr. Berry and even with Dr. Fung, they are doctors. And so they have anecdotal evidence that they present. They have stories. And it's those stories that kind of break up the monotony of the facts.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Whereas with her, the stories are about the scientists, but they're not about the patients. They're not about, people who've changed their diet and this is the outcome. The closest we get to that is explaining the clinical trials and how those people responded. So it does present differently. And I've been enjoying it because I'm very heavily left-brained, and I also do not have ADD at all. So I have a very good attention span.
I need to be entertained.
But I have a really good ability to focus on stuff like this.
Listen, Lynn, my whole goal of each day is to figure out a way that I can get my dopamine up. Okay, and I'm not, you think I'm joking. I'm not joking, okay? Today it was music.
Yeah. Well, but before I was a nurse, for 15 years, I was an accountant.
Oh, Lord help you.
So I was a corporate accountant. So I've got that, that's just me. I dealt with numbers all day long.
Yeah,
I'm kind of a mix, I do data analysis for a living, compile statistics and stuff. Although there are other facets to my job, but that's the main one so I'm very interested in data and just how it's presented, where the data comes from, that kind of thing. So in that sense, but at the same time, I have a creative brain. So I don't know if I'm I think I'm just like in the middle. I'm not totally right-brained or totally left-brained. Both sides need to be fed. And this book is very analytical, or just very methodical. She really does present things, and it's just like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the hard work that's gone into it, and I appreciate, she's done a fabulous job with it. It's just that you have to take it in smaller doses. Even as much as I love data and I love to read things, I really am into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you really do have to, or for me anyway, it's in smaller chunks, I think.
Yeah.
Well, the hardest thing for me is keeping track of all the players, I think maybe if I actually read it in the physical book instead of listening, which I like to listen, but I find that when
it doesn't help, Kim.
Does it not?
No. I read the book.
I'm not able to I'm hearing these names and there's so many of them. And I feel like maybe if I saw it on a piece of paper, I would be like, oh yeah, that's the G word name, because I'm not going to remember all these.
It's so funny you brought that up, because literally when I was reading this chapter, I thought I need to have going back from my accounting days, I need to have a little T and put the good guys, bad guys. And just as we come along them in the chapter, put them in one of the columns.
Yeah.
Debits and credits.
Debits and credits.
Exactly. So Charlie, what do you think?
This was probably the most interesting account that I've ever read on trans fat. So, just the fact that she was able to kind of craft it into a narrative in what would probably be really dry, boring, studies, and that she was able to kind of get at the meat of, the personalities involved and everything. So she mentioned a guy that was very much, like Ansel Keys in terms of how he was able to bully certain people.
Yes.
So yeah, it really gap in my knowledge is, for the most part, trans fat seems to be out of the food supply, but I have no idea why. So I think this chapter helped fill in that gap.
Yeah.
I will tell you a good way to get some of this information is through Tom Naughton's Fathead documentary. It came out in the mid 2000s, maybe 2007 or 2008, somewhere in that time frame.
How do you spell his name? How do you spell his name? I'm going to put it in the comments.
It's Naughton, Naughton, Tom Naughton. He was a huge presence in the low carb / keto, and he may still be. I used to read his blog religiously, and he had a huge following. Fathead.
That's one I need to watch. I need to.
He's a comedian, and he used to live in California. And I don't know what it is about all these people, but he actually got a small farm, a la Dr. Berry, although I think Dr. Berry may have copied him. I don't know. But anyway, got a small farm in Tennessee, probably pretty close to where Dr. Berry is, I think. I mean,
okay, it's actually, I just Googled it. It's actually on YouTube for free. So we need to make that an assignment. We need to all watch that.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the notes too.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I've watched it several times. He did a fantastic job. And I mean, it's low budget, but he did a really, really good job with it. And he's a comedian by trade, or he was. He lived in California and he moved here to Tennessee. And he incorporated that humor into it. And his wife is an artist, and she did a lot of graphics and like cartoons and stuff that kind of went in it. So like the CSPI guy, for example, the one who pushed the movie theaters to get rid of the palm oil and the coconut oil.
Yeah, the popcorn.
He did a little cartoon. They did a little cartoon of him and called him the guy from CSPI.
Oh, funny.
He had a cape and stuff. So, I mean, he makes it really interesting. So you may want to watch that.
Yeah,
so,
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. See, that'll help my ADHD brain.
Charlie, remind me, I know you had mentioned before, what do you do for a work?
I'm an accountant.
You're an accountant.
Oh, I'm an accountant. I do accounting.
I understand the whole, if you've got the attention span for numbers, something like reading this isn't quite as bad.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
It was funny though, Lynn, when you were describing us all last week as left brain, I was like, is she talking about me?
You know what? You got to be to some degree left brain to be a nurse.
Maybe I'm like Carrie. I'm kind of like mid
in the middle.
Honestly, I am a person who focuses like, so I don't want to, I don't like to offend people. So I don't want to say like my children joke with me that I must be autistic, but but at least one, if not two of them are. And so I feel like they have a right to say that to me. Right. But they're like, Mom, you hyper fixate on your special interests. You've got like two special interests that you're constantly fixating on, And so I have that part of my brain that just like,
that's very much like Asperger's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's what Asperger's is not really a diagnosis anymore. It's just kind of
all on a spectrum.
Yeah, it's just all a spectrum now. But I'm pretty certain that at least one of my boys, and I'm not even going to say which one they know, has Asperger's. But we just didn't really feel the need to get tested because, they're very highly functioning. Yeah. Like, to me, I'm like, what's the point? I went back and forth. But anyway, I'm totally off on a... See, I have ADHD for sure.
You know what? I'm more balanced too, because I know I'm very, very left brain, but also I am very artistic too. Like I've actually published 4 coloring books.
Oh wow, that's cool.
I love art. I crochet, and so
we should pigeonhole ourselves anyway. You gotta have balance. Fabulous, and they work much better on meat. So
All right. So you want to dig in?
Yeah, let's
dig in.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I'll do just a kind of a quick summary. So this chapter is called Exit Saturated Fats, Enter Trans Fats. And so we've been kind of going through, and she's been showing kind of the evolution of what's happened to public perception and government backing and industry backing for fats over the course of the years. And so the saturated fats were being demonized and promoting vegetable oils. And there was such a ignoring trans fats. And so this chapter goes into, to me, it seemed like more like a war between the sides. Like it got to be, there was a lot of money behind it. There was a lot of an industry started out using what they he called them tropical oils, basically coconut oil, palm oil, the oils that came from, the Philippines and Malaysia.
Yeah.
And she was talking a lot about Malaysia and how they're big, that's their thing. She said, just like olive oil in Greece, palm oil in Malaysia was their oil, and they had subsisted off of it for thousands of years and been very healthy and not had heart disease. And so when the attacks started on these tropical oils, Malaysia was like, whoa, this is going to hurt us economically because we can't have. And I know she had talked about how the guy from Malaysian Ong, the guy that really, really went to bat for the palm oil industry, he knew that even though the US was just trying to change their guidelines, how it would have such an international impact.
And it did.
And it did, exactly. But so it was really interesting. Kind of an overall, this is like the battle that went on about the saturated fat and then these other oils that were still high in saturated fats. They got attacked, and then the push. Sorry, my phone. I forgot to turn my phone off. The push for the oils that were hydrogenated. Hang on, I gotta take this call. It's my brother.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So anyway, I guess we can just continue it on. Let's see. In terms of the war, it gotten really nasty. And what happened was the soybean industry started attacking the palm oil and the coconut oils, but specifically, from Malaysia, it'd be the palm oils, started attacking them, saying, that they were dangerous and had the saturated fat and they made your cholesterol go up and just all of that. And so it was a very negative, and because they were so scared of those oils. And so, of course, Ong decided, this is going to hurt us, so we need to fight back. And so this battle went on back and forth for quite a while. And they had the soybean industry, they had put these, for example, one of the ads or one of the pamphlets that they put together, it was like an anti-fat pamphlet that targeted these oils, and it had a coconut with a bomb, with a fuse on the end and just things like that. And then they had this other one that was like a sort of it was a very, and of course the gentleman, I can't recall his name off the top of my head, but the one that was with the soybean industry, he actually said that they really hadn't thought of it. And who knows, but viewing it from today's lens, it would be considered pretty, racist. But it was like this Asian fat cat business guy with a cigar and stuff, and basically saying, these are the people that are, they're selling this toxic oil to us,
Yeah.
And of course it just got nasty. But here's one thing that I found quite interesting is that they ended up calling a truce on it. But the food companies, now I know there's big food, and I understand that they have food scientists and they try to find the bliss point and all of this. So I totally get it. But at the same time, they were using the palm oil. They were using stuff that wasn't nearly as bad in their products. I'm not talking about like the people who made the even some of the margarine, I think, used palm oil, but it's like they were forced, just like the restaurants were, through CSPI, they were forced to start using the bad products. And so then when they started doing research, I understand, because it's expensive. I'm not going to say that these food products or these packaged foods are ever anything good to eat. You shouldn't depend on those if you ever eat them, especially nowadays. But it would be a treat or something. And that's how it was when I was a kid, these things were treats. They certainly were not something that we ever had every day. But at the same time, okay, so they were forced to change all their formulas because you had like flaking and this and that. And so when they had to take those oils out, the palm oil and the coconut oil out and use something else, they had to reformulate everything. And that takes a lot of time and money. It's expensive to do.
Yeah, things taste different. So that's going to.
Yeah. And so then here a few years later, now they're oh, well, these aren't good after all, these oils that we forced you into basically, and you had to change everything, but now these aren't good either. And so I understand why they fought back. I'm not saying it was right, but you could say, it's just like the movie theaters and all these people who were forced to, because of this pressure to change their what they were serving and that changed their product. It's like, come on, where does it end?
Did you guys get the impression from what she was saying that it almost was like, and I know you used the word forced, it almost seemed like they were initially pressured and kind of started to change because they knew the direction it was going to go in, because they can kind of see that it was going to end up being forced upon them. It seemed to me like they were starting to kind of, we better change because we can see the direction this is heading.
Yeah, they didn't want to in the beginning. They didn't want to use those oil. They didn't want to use the hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated fats and stuff.
But the media campaign was already going. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the way that the media was utilized to push this and change public perception. It's like the tide had already turned and industry was going, okay, public perception is already turning. So we better start looking at this and changing the oils we use.
Yeah. So, I got the impression they were kind of scared and, I mean, I'm sure they just constantly have their finger on the pulse of, society and what's being said and, what could affect their bottom line essentially.
Yeah. And I was interested, I don't know if you guys talked about this while I was off talking to my brother, but I was kind of interested in the explanation too of hydrogenation. Because I didn't really know what that meant. And it's the process that they go through with these oils. And it created, she mentioned it created all these other components like man-made fatty acids, like what you say, like 50 something.
There's one researcher that said there was an unknown amount.
Like all these, it changes the composition of it, of course, and it makes it so that it creates all of these like synthetic fatty acids that aren't found in nature, aren't found in real food. And then the one guy who was researching it found that these fatty acids deposit in our tissues. Mm-hmm. And they end up in heart tissue, in all the tissues of our body. He listed all these organs and all the different places that they found through and on autopsies of people. They found these synthetic fatty acids, and that was pretty shocking to me. And the fact that he found that, I don't remember what decade, because like you said, Kim, there was like so much chronicled out over the decades and all these people. Mm-hmm. But to me, it seems like it should have been shocking. And that should have been a huge red flag. But just as everything else that this guy tried to show, it was just silenced. And he got nothing but pushback. And so the hydrogenation process is, it just changes the quality of the oil, right? Depending on how much you hydrogenate it, like my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is the more hydrogenated it is, the more solid the oil is.
Yeah. That's what I understood.
And then initially they were having it would say on the label it's hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated. But then later in the chapter, she was talking about how they even kind of were shying away, wanting to drop the hydrogenated term. Mm-hmm. And because there was starting to get a negative connotation.
So basically the process of hydrogenation It says it was the alchemy that turned a liquid into a solid, and it opened up a vast new range of possibilities for these oils, which could now be used wherever solid animal fats had been used. So people were so afraid of the animal fats, the saturated fats, I don't know why I'm putting that in quotes, the saturated fats per se, that they wanted to get away from that. So they had to do this process of hydrogenation to get these other vegetable oils to a point where they could be used the same way that our animal fats were used.
Right.
And it says we saw how
butter and lard.
We saw how margarine became a substitute for butter, for instance, and how Crisco, an entirely new animal fat substitute, entered the U.S. market in 1911. Margarine and Crisco were both huge sellers in the first half of the 20th century. I mean, so this has been going on for a long time, like this whole process of let's take the natural good thing that comes from animals and even plants and, for some things, and replace it with something completely foreign and man-made. And that's a great idea to eat. I mean, and we wonder why we have so many diseases.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I've wondered as I was reading this, I was wondering, like, with all of these oils that they hydrogenated, I wonder what the like nutrient profile would be just having the oil by itself, and don't put it through the hydrogenation process. If it may not be healthy, but would it have been healthier and have fewer trans fats? So the trans fats, they're finding the people who were trying to show that the trans fats weren't healthy were finding all these negative implications, and they lowered your HDL cholesterol and they raised your triglycerides, and they were thinking that they might be linked to the heart disease. And then when they were finding all these synthetic fatty acids, the question was, well, maybe it's the synthetic fatty acids that are produced by the hydrogenation process. But that would have been, if you were dealing with true science, that would have been, okay, we need to do more research. And we need to find out, is it the trans fats, or is it these, what they call cis fats, that are produced by the process? But he couldn't get a grant. He couldn't get funding to do further research because this was not in the interest of industry, because by that time industry had just transferred over what they were doing. And
and that was kind of what I was getting at though too, is because I know it's big food, and I know that people are, that there's shareholders and, profit and all of that. But at the same time, I mean, think about it. If you're a business and you go through all this crap to get your stuff, reformulated, it's all tested again. You had to get new equipment, just all of this stuff in order to accommodate, because the public and health organizations and all these people are pressuring you to change your products, because otherwise you're not going to sell anything. So you have to change all your stuff. And then now, okay, well, this is bad now. So, you're going to have to change this. And so I kind of understand in a sense why they rebelled and why they were like, oh, hell no, we're not doing that.
And the funny thing is, by the end of the chapter, when they were talking about Unilever in Europe, they ended up going back. They ended up making the change again. They ended up going back to palm oil.
Yeah.
Which was the tropical oil at the very beginning of the chapter that was being attacked, and they used to use, and because it has more saturated fat, and they ended up going back to palm oil.
So I did want to interject though that the big corporations and food manufacturers, they and actually the small bakeries and everything, they actually benefited more from using this than the butter and lard and the animal fats, because they were highly versatile and a lot cheaper.
Yes.
And depending on the level of hydrogenation, as we kind of touched on this before, they can be tailored to a wide variety of food products. For instance, hardened oils perform superbly well in creating crisp, crumbly cookies, crunchy crackers, moist cupcakes, and flaky pastries. And their relatively smaller fat crystals means that shortenings made from these oils can trap smaller air bubbles that stay in the batter longer and produce reliably fluffy cakes. A chocolate candy could be customized to melt in the mouth, not in the hands, huh? You know where we're going with that, right? And less hydrogenation would produce softer type of chocolate for, say, a donut topping, while more highly hydrogenated oil would make the coating fat of individual box chocolates harder, and then it could keep things from getting soggy without being greasy. Like there was a huge draw for them. I'm sure once they switched, they were like, oh, we can do so much more with this, because it is, there were a lot of benefits for them as well.
Yeah, when I was reading that part, and there was talking about how they make things more moist.
Mm-hmm.
I had this flashback to all the decades where I'd get the Costco muffins, and you can get all there. And I remember thinking, oh, they're so good, they're so moist. And now I'm going, well, no wonder. Look, I was eating trans fats and all these, hydrogenated oils. So it's like,
but you're right, they were moist. Very moist.
Me so mad, because like the part of me that's still addicted to sweet things in my mind, like, which I don't eat, but the part of me that still wants to be able to eat those things, I'm like, if all along we had just done more natural things, like use the animal fats and just, maybe use the wheat, but not make it the bleached white, and we had just done things in a more natural way, where would we be right now? Would I be able to eat my donuts?
like in Europe,
sorry guys, but that I miss those,
and if we hadn't been spraying glyphosate all over everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was just watching yesterday a segment on regenerative farming, and and it was interesting because they interviewed this farmer who has converted his farm into a regenerative practice, which is so healthy. And they're showing the difference between the microbiome and the soil of regenerative farming versus traditional conventional farming. And they showed and it's like there's so much that we may potentially have been able to eat without being so inflammatory. They said they don't have to, this guy says he doesn't have to use pesticides, herbicides, insecticides. He can do everything completely natural and grow everything naturally because of the regenerative farm practices. And it was interesting. So they showed this thing that they did, this experiment where they took, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but they took 2 pairs of men's cotton briefs and they buried them, one in the soil of a regenerative farm and one in the soil of conventional farm. And I don't remember how much time had passed. It was probably a few months had passed, and they dug them back up. And the one buried in the conventional soil that was depleted was dirty, but it was intact. And the one that was buried in the regenerative microbe-rich soil was shreds, because all the microbes had eaten and consumed it, and which is what they do. They take, cotton is 100% cotton, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the microbes do. They take the plant matter, so if they take everything and they feed on it and they nourish the soil. And it's like, oh my gosh. So it does make me wonder, like, as if the US can migrate more towards regenerative farming, then it makes me wonder, could we possibly open up our diet?
Yeah.
Lynn, what is the name of that documentary?
Pardon me?
What is the name of that documentary you're referencing?
You know what? It was just a segment. I watched The High Wire on Rumble every week. It was just segment. And every week they have like a different focus. And this week the focus was regenerative farming. And so it was this past week's session of the High Wire. And the guys who did they have a documentary that they do, and they're vegan. So it's not like I agree with their diet, but they're really pushing for regenerative farming, which I completely agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was really interesting. And So it's a big question, because I know I've heard people talk about how in Europe you can go and you can eat the bread and you can eat their pasta and you can eat their baked goods and you don't get sick and you don't gain weight and you don't get inflamed and
And this is why we all have leaky gut, leaky gut, whatever. I mean, I believe leaky gut's a thing, but it's because our bacteria is just not right, I mean, some of us have even had tests to see what bacteria we have in there, and it's not right. It's, it's all
the test, the GI map test that I had done, it was after I'd been on the carnivore diet for a while. And I know my naturopathic doctor was concerned because my levels of anti-inflammatory bacteria were really low. And he's like, "Oh, this is a concern." And I'm like, well, maybe they don't need to be as high on the diet that I'm on.
I'm pretty sure everybody's is low. Are you talking about the Akkermansia?
There was a whole bunch of them. There were like 9 different bacteria that were all kind of anti-inflammatory, and like 8 of the 9 of mine were out of the normal range. But I told him, I said, I think the normal ranges are based on people on the standard American diet.
Yeah.
And so maybe typically they'll have higher levels of anti-inflammatory microbiome in their microbiome because they may need more. And it may be that I don't need as much. So but the leaky gut, I know the leaky gut was, a huge issue. I mean, when you look at my old rosacea photos, with the way my rosacea used to be, my face was horrible. It was like a leper. It was just blotchy all over the place and horrible. And I really believe that had to do with my gut, leakiness in my gut, But yeah, so the trans fats, there's so many different people that were involved and it was the decades.
And what about that one really rich guy? What was his name? He was like a millionaire, and he was,
his name is Philip Sokolov. Is that the one who's from Omaha, who had a heart attack in his 40s, and he basically did this whole smear campaign?
Yeah. He was a lone millionaire in Omaha, Nebraska, Philip Sokolov, who had an outsized impact on the U.S. food industry. He was neither a scientist nor an expert in the field, but after suffering a near-fatal heart attack in his 40s, made it his mission in his retirement to inform Americans about the dangers of saturated fats. His target was not animal fats so much as the coconut and palm oils that were being widely used by food companies in their packaged foods. And I felt like he had more impact than anything, because he actually created commercials against those companies that made it where they were pretty much, their hands were pretty much tied, that they were going to have to switch from using those.
Yeah. And he pointed out the products, and I didn't do a slide presentation, but I'll just hold this up. So this is one of his ads,
or I should say advertisements, not commercials.
Yeah. And see at the bottom, he actually put the photos of the products that he was calling out. And this really created an uproar in the food industry that produced these products. So he basically put out a smear campaign. And so let's see, on here he has Hydrox cookies, Club cookies, Goldfish, Crisco, something called Cremora, which I think that's a creamer, Cracklin Oat Bran, the little coffee creamers, Coffee Mate creamers, and Triscuits. He has all of those on this ad. And so those companies were like, and he's talked about he had full page ads in major newspapers with the headlines in all caps, "The Poisoning of America." Yeah.
It makes me wonder if these older formulations with the palm oil were any better than, the formulations with the trans fat, essentially, or the vegetable oils that would eventually be used in these formulations. I don't know. It makes me wonder if To your point earlier, is it the addition of, switching the fat source, make a bigger impact than the original formulations that were there? So,
Well, my understanding is that the palm oil and the coconut oil were not hydrogenated oils. I think they
They're
had,
not.
they had the saturated fats. I don't think they had the same degree of trans fats.
I don't think they had any trans fats. I don't think
Yeah.
they did. They were more natural fats. And I really think, just based on, my memory, which isn't always dependable, but I'm a child of the 70s/80s, and I just remember what people looked like back then. And we ate that stuff. Now, granted, like I said before, it was more of a treat. But I had friends who had it in their houses more than I did. And they weren't overweight, and, people were just generally healthier back then.
Thin. We were all thin. Yeah. I remember too. In school, we had one kid that was a little chubby and everyone else was very slender. And, but you know what, just though, to that point, remember back when we were reviewing Jason Fung's book, we were also talking about this and how we also didn't snack in between meals. We had, so there was more than one factor in keeping us lean and healthier. And of course, that lends itself to the fact that the quantity, and this was it Mary Enig, the really aggressive lady that was against the trans fats, but she sounded like she was kind of a bully on the far other side. But she was talking about how one of her concerns, which was a valid concern, was that the guidelines didn't factor in the quantity of these trans fats that the American public ate. And they did these trials, and there was all these trials that some of them were saying trans fats are not as bad. Others were saying they are really bad. But she said her argument was the trials that were saying that the trans fats aren't that bad, we're not factoring in the quantity, that it was quantity dependent as far as the degree of harm that it could produce. And so, so even though we did eat some back in the 70s, nothing like today. Absolutely nothing.
And Mary Enig, if I remember correctly, is also in the Fathead documentary. He actually interviewed Dr. Michael Eads and his wife, Mary Dan. Yeah. And so there are several of the keto/low carb community in that documentary. So, but anyway, she was featured in there in that too.
And she did mention, I guess, sounds like Nina Teicholz, sounds like she might have interviewed her, or at least had some quotes from her, but it sounds like she was aware that she wasn't going to have a whole lot of influence because she was a woman, that it was kind of like male dominated as far as the research being done, the papers being published, but it sounds like she was still pretty vocal.
Yeah, she was vocal, and she just decided to just say it, because it wasn't going to matter it wasn't going to matter anyway, because they weren't going to let her in the club. So she just reported it, or, just went ahead and basically just whatever her findings were, and, and she let the world know about them. Because it wasn't going to make any difference for her career anyway, in terms of whether she received any kind of monies. She wasn't going to be like a tenured professor or anything. Right. She wasn't going to be.
I think she was a part-time faculty member at what she called a second-tier university at the University of Maryland. So,
but obviously,
I thought it was interesting. I'm sorry. I thought it was interesting how they fought her on the amounts, but her reply was basically, look, if you're saying it's not bad at all, why does it matter, at any amount, right? So to the industry. So,
well, I think more about the amounts is just the fact that the amount that people are actually eating versus the amount that they were saying that people ate, or that they were using as a presumption. So it's like, we talk about all the time in the low carb space. A lot of times, like there will be some people that, will add fruit or just whatever. But they'll say, a small amount isn't bad. And that's probably true of anything, but it's just, but the problem with this hydrogenated oils or partially hydrogenated oils is that they were doing these studies on much lower numbers than what people were actually consuming. So the amount of what would be considered as poison was being misrepresented.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah. She did that. Well, she did that trial, which they talked about here in the book, with the feeding the women who were breastfeeding, the different diets, and the ones that where she fed the higher amount of trans fats, which she did. It wasn't like, she said that it was pretty much what she figured a normal person would eat in a given day. It wasn't an excessive amount, but she gave them a few products to eat each day that were very much what the American public was eating, and then tested to see how many of these trans fats actually came out in the breast milk. And it was a lot higher than what they were saying. And so that was, I mean, she did have a contribution to the argument against the trans fats. But then there was the was it Kumaro? He had a great, like, he's the one that kind of like, the second half of the chapter was the big focus, because he's the one that really kind of went to bat. He published more than 70 papers on trans fats over the course of his career, more than any other scientist worldwide. And was it the guy named Woods, or I think,
Woods
had kind of teamed up, and then Woods kind of got bullied out and just gave up, but he kind of stuck with it and kept being the voice, almost the lone voice, trying to combat and open up awareness. And it sounds like eventually, we started to listen, because, I mean, if we look now, it seems like now everybody knows that trans fats are bad. And so, but he's dedicated decades of his life to combating it. And he went against tremendous pressure. And he's the one who did the study. This is in 1957. He did the study about how the trans fats accumulated in the fat tissue, the artificial fatty cells that were supplanting normal fatty cells in all of the body's cell, supplanting normal fatty acids in all of the body's cells. So she said it's worth understanding that fatty acids are not just stored as fat, they are also used as building blocks in cell membrane. And so these artificial fatty acids were affecting every cell of your body, your cell membrane, and which is the, determines what gets into your cells. So, he's the one that brought that to light. He also showed that these unnatural fatty acids in the cell membrane actually had resulted in elevation of calcium in the cell. So he marinated cells from umbilical cords and different kinds of fats, and found that those in hydrogenated oil ramped up their intake of calcium. So these artificial fatty acids were allowing too much calcium into the cell, more than the cell needed. And so it resulted in calcification, and which we know is not good. And so his conclusion was that these elevated levels of calcium in the blood, are from the trans fats. So she showed the link between the trans fats and the heart disease, by showing kind of on a very cellular level what they're doing. So he did have quite an impact.
And then we've also seen, how when you start making your cell walls out of proper ingredients, like we experience now, eating carnivore, that there's so many things that are different. Like, you wouldn't even believe how many things change, from just how your skin looks. Like when I went to the dentist and they were like, your skin is just amazing. Like, they've seen me a lot, they know what my skin normally looks like. And if you go back in my first carnivore videos, you'll see, just acne all over, just, you know, and it's because my skin is being made out of, it's building its cell walls out of the proper, you know, materials now.
Right.
And I mean, that's just like a nerdy little bit that really is a real life application, you know?
Right. Right.
It's fascinating to me. And then the fact that we don't get sunburnt as easily. When people first started saying that, I was like, okay, carnivore can't do everything.
I noticed
No,
that.
it's a real thing. And I've told this story twice now, but it bears repeating. I have really burnt my hand pretty bad on, like, you know, just a kitchen burn, nothing major. It wasn't like, you know, a 2nd-degree burn, but wrapped my hand all the way around a cast iron skillet twice because I don't learn. And I mean, one time it was bad. I thought normally with that level of burn, it would have bubbled up, and it didn't. Wow. And not only did it not, but it didn't hurt nearly as bad, because the littlest burn used to hurt me so bad that I would actually get lidocaine cream and rub on it, or I'd keep a piece of ice on there. And I mean, I know it sounds crazy. I realize as it's coming out of my mouth, to some people, this is going to sound absolutely insane, but it's true. It's actually true. When you build your cells and such out of the right material, then they just work better, you know?
I noticed the same thing. I'm a quarter Irish and the rest is pretty much English, and burning is part of my whole life. And getting sunburned, you know, I'm the one that in the pool, I've got like the big old brim hat and I'm covered. I've got the t-shirt to cover everything. Right. But yeah, I've noticed that too. I don't get sunburned. And like I used to get sunburned within 10-15 minutes of being out in the sun, you know, and I have not gotten a sunburn since I started carnivore. So you're right. Well, I mean, it kind of stands to reason that,
I mean, that's not to say you can't get a sunburn. You definitely can, but
yeah,
it's just not as bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you don't want to be.
I can't attest to the sunburn thing because I don't know, a different skin tone, but
yeah.
Before carnivore, I would have like cracked heels, like my skin would get really dry, and as a guy, I don't really lotion, so I would have to lotion to kind of repair that. But the longer I've gone carnivore, the longer I've had, you know, more of the natural fats, especially, you know, upping that. I've not had to lotion, and my skin's been really, you know, healthy looking. So my wife is actually kind of jealous that, you know, she has all these creams and stuff, and I'm just downing fat, and my skin looks pretty good, and I'm not lotioning. So
is she eating a more traditional standard diet, or
closer to it? She takes like those weight loss injections, so that helps her kind of moderate. So she kind of eats, like, you know, the chicken and the salad, and, you know, reflexively goes towards that kind of stuff.
I spent 6 months on phentermine years ago and lost weight, and then it stopped working. You know, but yeah, no, I mean, it definitely, I know how, if it heals, I know how it's healed my gut. And so it stands to reason that the other tissues in your body are also healing. And it does, if it builds up an appropriate cell membrane, then that's going to be super important, because then your cells are getting what they need. And it makes me wonder too, like with all of these artificial synthetic type, you know, fatty acids making up your cell membrane, I wonder how much your body's immune system reacts to that and sees it, because our immune systems are smart, right? How much does that lend itself to inflammation all over the body, when even
That's
our
probably
cell
why
membrane,
everybody has psoriasis and you know, rashes, and you know,
because your immune system is going to rush to the defense of anything foreign. And so if your cell membranes are even foreign, you know, you're going to have inflammation on a cellular level, which is like, no wonder we don't function well and don't feel well, you know, on the standard diet. It's, I mean, the impact of what this Kumaro found to me was astounding, and the fact that it was ignored is just like how bad do the findings need to be before people stop ignoring it, before industry stops ignoring it?
Yeah.
To me,
I mean, we're now ignoring aliens, so
yeah. To
there's
me,
nothing
the
we
Kumaro
won't.
findings. To me, the Kumaro findings were, far more interesting than the fact that, it causes a slight decrease in, HDL and an increase in LDL. Because, to your point, if you're making, if you're trying to build a brick house, but you're given like foam instead to build it, there's a lot of question of, well, what happens downstream? What happens to your gut biota that you were talking about earlier? What are all these downstream consequences? To me, those are the more interesting questions than the fact that it tended to lower HDL and increase LDL, which we'll talk about later.
Right. And even though the studies did show that the changes in LDL and HDL weren't huge changes, so I agree that this to me is way more impactful of how it affects all the tissues and cells of your body in a negative way. And it just, like, I spent my whole life eating these types of fats up until I started the carnivore diet. And so it just astonishes me how it's been 11 months. What's the date today? Is the day the 28th?
Yeah.
11 months tomorrow, the 29th, is, being on the carnivore diet, and how so much has healed and repaired in that relatively short period of time compared to since birth, this garbage I was being fed. I mean, I wasn't breastfed, so who knows what was in the formulas back in the 60s.
I wasn't either. So sorry, Mom.
I wasn't either, come to think of it. My mother tried. She really wanted, my mother was up until, it's really weird because it's the tale of two mothers, because like when I was a kid and like into my teens, she was very like, for example, we would go to the health food store and she would get like the teas, like red raspberry leaf tea, and she would prefer natural ways of dealing with things. She never took medication. She prided herself on never taking medication, not even for a headache. I mean, ever. And so it's just like, so she, like us children, we were born naturally. All three of us, she wouldn't, even though it was kind of like the trend to do what they call a saddle block back then, like when me and my brothers were born, she refused to do that. She didn't want to be knocked out. She thought childbirth was a natural thing. And so she did pass that wisdom on to me. So like when I had my kids, I had them naturally too. And I mean, it went pretty smoothly. It was painful, but the whole point is that she tried to breastfeed me, but couldn't, apparently. And of course, now in retrospect, I wonder, maybe some of the stuff that she was told was healthy to eat, perhaps weren't, and it interfered maybe with her breast milk production or something like that. She really, she wanted to, but she couldn't. And so I had formula too.
It wasn't a big trend back then. Like the trend was getting away from breastfeeding back then. And I don't know why that was, but it goes in waves. Sometimes it's like everybody's breastfeeding, and then at other times in history it's been, oh no, you don't have to do that. Don't be tied down. Just give them this formula. It's just as good, And I really feel like that's what my mom thought, that was just as good, because that's probably what they were told.
Yeah. Well, and then too, I know the women's liberation movement kind of started in the early 70s, but I'm sure the waves of it were started earlier, because the 60s was a decade of rebellion, and everything was kind of shifting in the 60s. And so it may be that women in general were kind of getting unsettled with their domestic lives and wanting to get more into the workforce. And so that probably impacted the breastfeeding decisions. And before the official, women's lib movement,
it probably wouldn't have been much of an option, honestly, because these women were working full time. And, I would say their breast pumps back then, if they existed, weren't, they certainly weren't where they are today.
That's what it was with my mom. I mean, my mom was working well, and my mom had stayed home and stuff with my brother and sister, but she was 40 when she got pregnant with me. and was a shock. And she had been working. And so with me, she decided to go back to work for, just for the first year of my life. Then she missed me too much and came home. But yeah, so the working, I think, was a big factor. And so nutrition, I mean, so I think people older than us has some better nutrition, if they, like, I think the older you get, maybe the nutrition at least was more natural. But the oils, now that I'm learning this, is obviously the oils have been tampered with since the mid 1800s.
Yeah.
Just, to get things cheaper. It sounded like it was all just to save money, and to make more money. Everything is that way, right? Yep. Follow the money. So anyways, let me see if there's anything else interesting here. I mean, there was so much. Like I said, I should have made a T chart, a T diagram, and put the the good guys and the bad guys. And oh my goodness, there's a lot. There's this Thomas Applewhite who was really combating, was on the other side combating Kumaro.
Mm-hmm.
And, he called himself the ringleader on trans. So his job. They said, and this other guy who was this, said preserving trans fats from the taint of negative scientific findings was the charge. This was that organization that was specifically focused on edible fats, edible oils. So it became part of their mission to combat. And that's what is it? Was it this guy who said for this Mary Enig that didn't know how she slipped under their radar?
Yeah. Because they were on the lookout for any studies or anything that would cast a bad light.
Yes. It was this organization and Applewhite, and she said that they'd been keeping a careful watch to prevent articles like mine from coming out in the literature, and didn't know how this horse had gotten out of the barn.
Yep.
Like, wow. So they had an agenda for sure.
Yeah. And the, let's see here, that Thomas Applewhite, whatever his name was, didn't he follow, hold on, Kumaro or the names? It's the names for me.
Conferences.
So followed him around to conferences. And this Kumaro, it specifically said that he was very not political. Like this guy he thought a certain way and he had researched it, and he sounded like he was just legit in his, wanting to get this information out there. And so this guy follows him around to conferences and sits in the front row and just basically terrorizes him, because in order to go to these conferences, you had to produce your what you were going to speak about ahead of time and lay that all out so everybody knows what you're going to talk about. So all this guy had to do was look and say, oh, he's got to make this point. This is what I'm going to say, and he'd jump up and say just ridiculous stuff that, I think
professional troll.
Yeah, exactly. A troll before there was the internet.
Exactly.
Exactly. That they said he was a tall man with a booming voice. He would jump up and make points. He was very aggressive, and Kumaro found him intimidating. So the extent that they went, and obviously they had the money to back them in sending him to these conferences and doing all the things they were trying to do to suppress the information. They had industry backing. The money comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
He's not paying. And Kumaro ended up, this is what I thought was really interesting. So she said Kumaro never gave up. And in 2013, at the age of 98, he was still publishing papers and pressuring the FDA to ban trans fats from the food supply altogether.
I love that.
Yes, I love that. I think that's so awesome. And the fact that he was able to produce papers and still be applying pressure to the FDA at age 98.
And he
wasn't eating those trans fats.
He was not eating the trans fats.
His brain was working.
Of a win, I felt like at that point, it was like,
okay.
They weren't totally I felt like they were kind of on their way out. So He was
yeah. She said in
he got to see a little bit of a
2014, which is the next year, goes when he was 99. She said, partially in response to his petition, the FDA appears to be on the verge of doing this. And that's the year that this book was written. So do we know if they actually ended up banning the trans
In
fat?
2015, I think in 2015, the year after the book was published, they gave industry like 3 years to phase out trans fat from the food supply.
Okay. So he won. But I hope he lived to know that.
I hope he did too. We'll have to.
He
We
at
should
least
look
saw
him
which
up.
way he was headed.
Yeah, I'm gonna look him up.
What I always get with is on when you read the nutrition labels, there is like a spot for trans fat, and we know that sometimes they can list 0 grams if it's less than 1 or 0.5 or something like that. So I wonder if there's probably more to the story than that. There should be an epilogue to this or something.
Well, one of the things that she brought up, and I forget who it was that actually discovered this, it may have been Kumaro, was that there are trans fats in animal products, but they discovered that the type of trans fats, there was one difference in the hydrogenation chain that made all the difference in how our body responds to it, and they were not as harmful as the trans fats from the hydrogenation process. So
I've heard it said that like grass-fed beef will contain small amounts of natural trans fat, but
yes,
obviously the body reacts to that a lot differently.
So Kumaro lived until May 31st, 2017. So he did live to see that. He lived to be 103.
Wow, that is so great.
That is like finally the culmination of your life's work, right?
Yeah. So this is his Wikipedia page. It says that he was best known as an opponent of the use of artificial trans fats in processed foods, carrying out a 50-year campaign for a federal ban on the use of the substance in processed foods. He was one of the pioneers in establishing the connection between trans fats and heart disease, and he helped to cement the inclusion of trans fats in the Nurses' Health Study. He also discovered that it is oxidized cholesterol rather than the cholesterol that causes heart disease. So his Wikipedia page is positive about him.
And I've just got to show you guys this real quick. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen for this. My dogs are going to bark, of course, right now. But I have to show y'all this. He was the cutest little man ever.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, look at him. He's precious.
He is very adorable. Dies at 102. So he didn't quite meet this 103. Oh my goodness. Yes, he is
precious.
Very adorable. Yeah, because he was born in October of 2014 and he died in May of 2017. So yeah, he was,
and he looked like he was still sharp too.
Yeah,
he had that spark in his eye.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like Wikipedia is a fairly new thing, and I look at a lot of these people who are out there trying to conduct science now that's considered controversial, and how their Wikipedia pages get completely they get all this negative stuff. They call them conspiracy theorists, and they bash them and stuff because they're challenging the accepted
or
norm.
they remove them like they did Malcolm.
Or they remove them. Yeah. And so this is nice that they actually, he's not here, but his wiki page is actually decent.
Well, along the same lines there, don't you guys love how anytime there's a woman that's any kind of that gives any pushback at all in any of these books that we've read, they're always they're always they're nuts, so paranoid. That's what they said about this woman. It says that she wasn't a shrinking violet, and they described her as nutso, paranoid, off the wall, and a zealot. It's just so funny.
It's describing me.
The guys are just the guys are passionate, and they're even in today's society, we still look at women who are passionate as they're the B word, or they're just not right in the head, when if it was a man, it's just funny.
Yeah, that's true. They did describe her with all of those things. So, yeah. It was very interesting. So there was a lot of back and forth. I'm just glad to know that we have obviously came out with some success for people who dedicated their whole lives to trying to get the word out about what's harming our health. But we still don't, even though trans fats, there's more awareness now about trans fats, we still are fighting the battle for animal fats.
Yeah.
It's like fighting, the way that they attacked it, it's like we got to fight it in reverse. We've got the the trans fat battle seems to be okay, but now we got to get back to the animal fat.
So I was thinking about this the other day. I think that this is going to happen naturally because we only have about 50 years left of being able to plant crops and grow them for food. So in my mind, I'm like, is this going to happen naturally? Are we going to naturally transition to eating more animal-based foods because we're going to be forced to? Like,
well, how is that going to work though if the animals don't have the pasture land, if the soil is so depleted? And this was another thing that was mentioned in that
the animals make the pasture, make it
right. So they got to start now while they still can.
Did I use the right word?
With the regenerative farming, because in the segment I was watching yesterday, it was something like 97% of the soil is currently depleted and not healthy.
So maybe this will prompt people to actually listen to people like Dr. Berry and others. And maybe this will, sorry guys, if y'all can hear my dogs barking.
That's okay.
Maybe this will provide like kind of the perfect storm for guys, we've got to do something, and this is an option. Our animals can actually help us get our soil back to where it needs to be, and we can learn about regenerative farming and
right. Because I listen to the people who are trying to get us to eat the artificial meat and trying to get us to eat the bugs, and they're talking about really decreasing the amount of livestock out there, and like they're not really mentioning the important role of livestock. Now, this is one thing I appreciated about these two vegan guys that were being interviewed, is that they acknowledge the importance of the livestock. You can't be into regenerative farming without acknowledging the importance of the animals. Now, they didn't acknowledge how many creatures die in the planting and harvesting of their vegan food, but they did at least acknowledge the importance of the livestock when it comes to the regenerative, the soil. So it's
it would also give them better quality foods to eat too. And so just because they don't want to eat animals, which is fine, I'm all for anybody eating whatever they want. So we can eat our animals. They would have their clean, natural, truly organic vegetables, and everybody would be happy.
Right. And they would be really, truly organic. Yes.
Yeah.
But the only thing that would make it like probably that much better, and there would be probably zero unemployment at this point, is if all the crops ended up being handpicked.
Yeah.
Because then they wouldn't be plowed over, and all of the little critters and everything in the fields would not get killed.
And unfortunately, I know that's definitely not going to happen. AI coming out, because I even watched this AI thing that was picking fruit recently, and that's where they're going with that, so.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe if it does end up getting handpicked, it'll be through machines. But I don't see that happening because it's just so efficient to run that tractor through and the harvester and harvest everything. But unfortunately, it kills so many of these little critters that are living in the fields.
We're talking like there's so many steps of that running through, like in the very beginning, just to get the soil. Like it's not just the picking, in the very beginning, just to get the soil turned over where you can even plant. You're running over that soil many times with the machines and and then the stuff you spray on it and stuff. And I don't know, it's just, and then planting the same thing there year after year after year, not giving it a rest. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much that we need to do differently. But the one farmer that they were interviewing who does who switched his practice over to regenerative farming, he said it's actually saved him like $2 million a year. Yeah.
Wow.
He has a large acreage because he said with the practices, he saves $400 per acre.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that might be some good incentive for people to actually try it.
Yeah. Well, and so these guys are working on this documentary, and they have a documentary that's coming out. And so that's going to be explained in the documentary. And I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it. Like I said, I watched the interview on the High Wire, which I watch on Rumble. They do a weekly news, like medical news session. And, yeah.
What you described, Lynn, reminds me of the children's fable of the giving tree, except it's like, the giving soil, right? You can only take so much before it can't give anymore, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a bank account. You can't just take with withdrawals. You have to make deposits.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I just found this on Regenerative Farmers of America. They actually have on their website a list of documentaries about regenerative farming, so you can learn about it. Now that's cool. I'm going to have to look into this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's several actually.
Yeah. I just love the whole practice of regenerative farming. And, I mean, we, if our soil is that depleted, 97% of it depleted, then we need to do something about it. So nice. Thanks. Nice, Arlene.
Yeah.
So are you feeling better, Arlene? I know she's been fighting stuff. Hopefully you're feeling better. So, all righty. So where are we at with time? All right.
Let's see.
And she actually pulled a Dr. Fung, and she ended the chapter with a little like making you feel like you want to read a little bit more, because she brought Walter Willett back into it.
Walter Willett.
And her last sentence, so let's see. So he was the one that was introduced the world to the Mediterranean diet.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, by establishing these fats as officially vilified ingredients, Willett would set them down the path toward their near total eradication from the food supply. And then she says, and this might have been a good outcome if what replaced trans fats in terms of the impact on health had not been potentially so much worse. Period. End of chapter.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So I guess we got to read. So the next chapter, 9, is exit trans fats, enter something worse? ?
Yep.
So
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. So
they wouldn't use the logical thing, animal fats. No. Let's come up with something else.
Right. So next week is
glad you're better on them.
I am almost 100% sure I'm not going to be able to be here for next week unless for some reason I do it in the car on the way to the airport.
Hey, do it.
I might.
Yeah.
We'll see. I will read the chapter in anticipation of being ready. But keep in mind, my daughter's wedding is Friday. I'm probably, if I read the chapter, it'll probably be Saturday in a state of sheer exhaustion.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you have to miss one, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, and so the phone call earlier from my brother. Okay, so here's this little saga that's going on, right? Because I'm trying. They're going to be staying at an Airbnb, and they were talking about, maybe going there and then having me come over there. I've been really wanting to set up my camera on a tripod so I can film them walking into my house, and because they haven't to see me and get the reaction. And they're like trying to get me to go there instead. And I'm like trying to come up with like a reason, like why they should at least stop by here first. I was trying to have that conversation with him. It's like, oh my gosh, don't make this hard.
Yeah, so what is he going to do?
I don't know yet. I told him to keep me posted. And so I told him, well, I don't know my daughter's plans, but I know she's really looking forward to seeing you. And, so it'd be really good if you guys could come over. So they were still a
You
couple
say, I
hours
have
away.
something for you over here, and I'm not gonna. It's bigger than what I'm gonna be able to carry in my car.
Well, it'll all work out one way or another. And I'm just like, you know how it
Yeah.
is when you have a surprise and someone is trying to like unknowingly sabotage your surprise,
Yeah.
and you're trying to be like, oh my gosh, just cooperate. Yeah. So thank you, Arlene. I'm sure her wedding is going to be beautiful. I finally got my mother the bride dress.
Oh.
So I had been debating because I had picked out a dress, and then I came home and I saw myself in it in a picture, and I'm like, I don't really like the fit. It kind of makes me look fatter. And so I went and bought a whole bunch of dresses off of Amazon, tried them on, and found something I liked better as far as the fit goes. And then by the time I went to return it at the shop, I found out I should have read the receipt at the beginning, 7-day return policy.
Jeez.
So they said, all we can do is exchange it for another dress equal or greater value. And so what I ended up doing was trading it in for a size smaller, and that actually fits nicely. So yeah. So I had to return 6 dresses to Amazon.
Oh gosh.
And I hate trying on clothes. I hate it. I hate trying on clothes.
Me too.
It's
I
terrible.
didn't realize how many nice dresses you can get off Amazon. Like really nice formal gowns.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arlene, that's not the one I was able to get. I only posted pictures of 2 on my channel, and one of them fit beautifully. I mean, and really, like, I had a waist and all that, but the sleeves were way too tight. I couldn't find it in a little bit bigger size. And the other one that no one on my channel liked is the one that I ended up getting, but it looks better a size smaller. So I know it is what it is, but everyone else loves it. So
there you go.
Yeah. But
all right. Well, do we have anybody else want to say anything before we wrap it up?
Any last words? Any last words, Charlie?
No, I had a good met up some local carnivores and keto folks here in Indy yesterday. Hosted Brett at Hoosier Carnivore, so it's a good time. There's like about 24 or so folks, so it was good. I think John from Carnivore Backwoods also came up to Indy, so that was good to see. So that's about it. Oh, I turned 41 this Thursday. So
oh, that was my daughter's birthday, the 25th,
May 2nd.
Oh, you
mean this coming? Okay.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, happy birthday!
Yeah,
happy early birthday.
Nice.
One final thought on this book is the chapter titles for 8 and 9. It reminds me of a play off of a famous Metallica lyric where, instead of exit night, enter light, she's, talking about different trans fats. I wonder if that had anything to do with how she, named.
Maybe.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, Charlie, are you a metal fan?
So maybe she's a big Metallica fan.
Are you a metal fan?
No, I just know the lyrics to that song.
Okay. That would be funny because we all like metal.
That is, look, and I should have noticed that. That's very observant, Charlie, because I didn't. That is. But now that I look at it, I'm like, exit night. But here's the thing. Well, enter something worse. Enter Sandman.
Enter Sandman. Yeah.
Right.
I noticed.
I actually have a mat in front of my door that says Enter Sandman. I got it from the Metallica site. They had some kind of a flash sale, and I got it for like half off, and I ordered it.
Cool. I noticed that Dr. Jason Fung did that too with some of his. Only he did Star Wars.
Yeah.
And my boys love metal and they love Star Wars. So
my daughter is a warzy.
Yeah, it's funny to see people's personalities coming out, even in such a serious book.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Awesome.
All right, everybody.
Okay, guys. I guess we're gonna wrap up. We haven't done this in the last few episodes, but make sure that you guys come over and visit me at Carnivore Nurse Kim, Carrie at My Meatomorphosis with an O, and Lynn at Midlife Carnivore on YouTube and some other platforms for each of us. Just the usual suspects, the usual places. But and then we're trying to talk Charlie into making an at Darth Carnivore YouTube channel. And I hear his name all over the Carniverse. So
yeah,
I think
he's great in the comments, and and honestly, and if not, if you want to come on and do lives on our channels or come in for an interviews, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I love interviewing different carnivores and hearing their stories. Yeah.
I mean, and Charlie, you could just use your live content and just stream it, and you'd have a channel without even trying.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're going to keep trying to talk you into it.
Yeah. For some reason, I don't have a channel, but I have to subscribe. I don't know how that happens. So.
Yeah. Well, whenever you have a YouTube, username out there, it automatically creates a channel for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you guys next week for chapter 9. And until then, you guys have a great week.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.